Hello, true readers. I decided to make a short video today to discuss my overuse of adjectives in my poetry, right? I say overuse because in academia, and not just academia, but really talented writers and authors and poets, anyone who uses words professionally, will tell you not to use a lot of adjectives in your work. However, I break that rule, and I break it often. Now, before I get into the reason why I use adjectives and how I do it, I just wanted to address something about these poetry process videos that I'm creating. I plan to make one every so often, just to kind of divulge a little bit more about what makes my work tick, how I go about creating it, and why I do what I do. And if I had to sum all that up to one word, I would say it would be legacy. For the first time in my life, I feel middle-aged. You know, I'm 49 and pushing 50. And up until this winter season, I continued to feel pretty young. But something kicked in. And now I have this curmudgeon-y desire to explain myself. And I kind of want my work to outlive me. So therefore, I want the context of my work to outlive me. While poetry is always open to interpretation, and of course I want it to be. That's how my individual reader finds their truth, and the empowerment to confront the world. But I also want people to have an understanding about why I wrote the way I did, why I crafted the poems I crafted. And that requires a little bit of explanation, for the lack of a better term. So why don't we want to use a lot of adjectives in our work? And why do I break that rule and completely fill my poems with adjectives? Okay, so let me address the first part of that question. We don't want to use a lot of adjectives because we want to avoid redundancy. That's generally a good rule of thumb to follow. Okay, you want to use as many nouns and verbs as you can to get where you're going, and save your adjectives for, as a support mechanism to take your work to the next level. Don't lean on them. Don't use them as a crutch. Okay, that's what professors, English teachers, professional writers will tell you all day long, right? You also have to understand that people who use a lot of adjectives are usually just lazy writers. They're not trying to reach a new level of art or creativity. They're just trying to throw something down on paper. They're using a bunch of adjectives to sound clever, and that's the end of it. You also want to stay away from ugly prose, right? And a lot of adjective use can often lead to that. You don't want to bore your reader. You don't want to make them put your work down and never look at it again. And then the maybe the most important rule is that heavy adjective use can lead to cliché. Okay, you don't want any of your work to be riddled with cliché. That's a good way to get people to walk away and never look at your work again. Now, why do I break that rule and use a lot of adjectives? Okay. Before I get into that, I'm going to let you know, I'm going to use an example of one of my poems titled Degenerate. And it's from my Sidewalks collection, okay? And we're going to get into that here in a couple minutes. And you're going to see why I use so many adjectives. But just to explain it to you, okay, I use a lot of adjectives because I'm trying to paint a scene here, man. I want to deliver an emotion to you as quickly as humanly possible, okay? So essentially what I'm doing is I'm building a little universe in each poem. Inside that universe lives truth and emotion. And I want you there with me as fast as possible so then I can take you on this mountain journey, we'll call it, to the conclusion. And at the conclusion is truth. Sometimes that truth is a hard stop. Sometimes the truth is a piece of enlightenment. It could be a number of things, okay? So you're going to find a little bit of truth on the journey, and at the end, you're going to come to that conclusion. I want you there with me as fast as possible. That's why I use a lot of heavy adjectives. However, and I believe my readers would agree with me on this, my work is not redundant, it's not lazy, it's not ugly. I'm able to pull that off. I'm able to pull off heavy adjective use without succumbing to the problems that typical heavy adjective use leads to. And the reason for that is practice, right? Just practice makes perfect. And I have my own style that I've created over the years. But I do use a lot of adjectives. And the casual reader of mine, and I've been called out by this, by people who don't really read me, and they'll like pick up one or two of my poems and they'll don't want to like, argue with me or tell me how wrong I am or something. That I've heard it before, and I tell them, keep reading me. You'll see where it's going. And quite frankly, not to sound arrogant, but this is why my work is in a class separate from a lot of, say, the more, amateur writers. Okay, I would say the driving philosophy that supports my work is that literature worthy of working people empowers the soul. It empowers us in our workplaces and in all of our relationships. Once we have hold of that truth and we feel good about ourselves and we feel confident in who we are, we then have the tools to take on the world. We can confront that which needs confronted. And if I can paint those emotions and I can get you into that place with me quick, we're rock solid. That's why I do what I do. Okay, so I promised that I would show you an example, or at least read to you an example, of my heavy use of adjectives. In the poem Degenerate, which is in my Sidewalks poetry collection that you can get from my website or Amazon.com or wherever, there's a link at the bottom of this video. In that poem, I use 18 adjectives. Okay, that's almost one adjective per line. Okay, not one adjective per stanza, one adjective per line. Okay, almost, not quite. So I'm going to read it to you, and then you're going to see what I'm getting to. I'm going to try to punctuate the adjectives here and there, just because you have to listen to it. Now, if you're a reader of mine, on my Patreon, I'm going to have the poem printed there. Okay, so I encourage you, if you're not a Patreon of mine, please come over. The links at the bottom of this video. Join us. Support the author. Degenerate. I'm the degenerate you love to hate, the unclean sinner who won't toe the line. You ridicule my independence at dinner parties, among similarly dressed cronies, the institutionalized prisoners of prestige. Hate us all, the degenerates. Scorn the indie musician on the sidewalk. He colors the dull march of the khakis. Despise the painter in welfare housing. She strokes thick lines of anguish onto uncomfortable canvases. Taunt the quiet poet at the end of the bar. He writes raw truth on napkins gone ignored. Loathe the degenerate you secretly fuck when fashionable friends aren't looking. Eyes fixed on your contemptuous smirk, I am unable to cast judgment upon you. Another degenerate spreads her tattooed thighs without any hope of acceptance. She only wishes to feel, for a moment, the intoxicating sensation of your temporary love. The degenerate's climax is the richest syrup that briefly covers your vanilla routines. Debauchery provides you a moment to feel freedom within slums, the pleasures of darkness, and the uninhibited passions of life without approval. Okay. In that poem, Degenerate, I use 18 adjectives, as I previously said. And I try to punctuate them a little bit throughout so you can kind of get a feel for how almost every line contains an adjective. So that's how I do it. Hope you enjoyed the work. Hope you continue to read me. If you're not quite a reader of mine yet, I encourage you to join Patreon. Again, if you're interested in my Sidewalks collection, which Degenerate appears in, the link is below, along with links for all of my other poetry collections. My next poetry collection is set to come out in the spring. I'm not really willing to release the title yet, but I will let you know once I'm ready to roll. Thank you so much.